Hey, I'm Nathan, and before we start, I want you to sit with one number: 6 minutes. That's how much phone time a Navy saturation diver gets in a month when he's living inside a steel chamber pressurized to 480 feet of seawater. 6 monitored minutes to hear your kids' voices. Now imagine somebody figured out how to steal those 6 minutes, month after month, for 3 years, and use the silence to build a whole fake version of you inside your own children's heads. That's the story we're doing today, and it's the reason I wanted to tell it, because the villain here isn't loud. She's organized. She uses paperwork, routing numbers, notary stamps, and a very sweet voice, and she nearly gets away with all of it. What I want you to watch for is how the father answers. He's a man who works 400 feet underwater for a living, where panic burns your gas and your gas is your life. And he has been trained his entire adult career to do the single hardest thing a furious man can do: come up slow. Stay with me. The last 6 minutes of this one are going to stay with you. At 480 feet, the world is the size of a closet, and it never gets dark, because there is no sun down there to lose. Colter Vessey had lived in that closet for 19 days. The chamber was a steel cylinder 8 feet across, welded to the deck of a dive support vessel holding station over a broken cargo ship in the Ionian Sea, and inside it, the air was 94% helium, which meant every word he spoke came out as a cartoon squeak that a computer had to unscramble before anyone topside could understand him. It was hot, and it was damp, and it smelled permanently of warm rubber. He shared it with Senior Chief Ivor LaChance, a man who had been his bellman and his friend for 11 years, and who snored like a compressor with a bad valve. Colter was 41 years old, and he was a master diver, which in the United States Navy is not a rank but a species. He had a chest like a barrel door, gray coming in at the temples, and the specific stillness that men get when their job is to solve problems in places where hurrying will kill you. His father, Bertram Vessey, had been a hard-hat diver on Gulf pipelines before his lungs quit, and Bert had given his son exactly one rule, repeated so often that Colter had heard it in his sleep since he was 9. The water doesn't care how angry you are. It only cares whether you did the checks. That rule had made Colter very good at his job and very bad at the thing his wife wanted from him, which was noise. Twyla Vessey had married a quiet man and then spent 9 years being disappointed that he was one. She was 34, from Cutgrass, Louisiana, a flat little town in Belclair Parish, where the ditches ran the color of coffee, and half the working trucks had the same 3 surnames painted on the doors. They had 2 children. Nettie was 9, all elbows in observation, a kid who read the room before she entered it. Augie was 7 and had never once entered a room quietly in his life. Colter had a photograph of the 2 of them taped inside the chamber above his rack, curled at the corners from 3 years of humidity, and every morning, at whatever the clock claimed was morning, he touched it with 2 fingers before he went out through the trunk and into the water. He was in the Ionian Sea because the Navy had loaned Mobile Diving and Salvage Unit 2 to a joint salvage operation on a sunken freighter, and because Colter had volunteered for the billet. That part mattered. Nobody had made him take it. The SAT billet paid a stack of special duty pay on top of his base pay, and Colter had done the math at his kitchen table with a mechanical pencil and come up with a number he could send home every month: $2,700. An allotment, automatic, off the top, before it ever touched his hands. He had told Twyla it was for the kids' teeth and the kids' shoes and the kids' summers and one day, maybe, a house that wasn't rented. 3 years of that. 36 months. $97,200. The problem with saturation diving is that it is a one-way door. Once your blood and your bones are saturated with helium at depth, you cannot simply go up. If you go up fast, the gas comes out of solution inside you like a shaken soda, and it takes your joints, then your spine, then your brain, in that order. To come up from 480 feet, a man has to sit in a decompression schedule for 5 days. 5 days of the chamber bleeding pressure off a few feet an hour, while your body gives the helium back. There is no emergency exit. There is no exception. Whatever happens in the world while you are down there, you are 5 days away from it, always. Which is why the Navy gave him 6 minutes. Once a month, when the vessel's satellite link had bandwidth to spare, life support would patch a call into the chamber. The audio went through a helium unscrambler, so Colter sounded like a man talking through a fan. 6 minutes, monitored, logged in a green notebook by Chief Rhoda Bostic, who ran life support and who was the closest thing that ship had to a mother. He had used those 6 minutes for 36 months, and for 36 months, roughly, a woman's voice had answered the number he called and told him the kids were at practice, at a sleepover, at church, in the bath, on a field trip, asleep. Always sweet, always so sorry, always with a small warm laugh at the end that made you feel foolish for pushing. Her name was Lurline Quarles. She was Twyla's mother, and she was 63 years old, and she had a face like a church supper and a mind like a set of books. Colter had never liked her, and he had never been able to say why, which is its own kind of warning that men are trained out of hearing. Lurline had opinions about how a man ought to provide, and she delivered them the way you'd hand someone a casserole. When Colter had deployed the first time, Twyla had moved the kids into Lurline's place on Old Sawline Road, just till the lease is up, and the lease had never come up again. Lurline had a long white house with a wraparound porch, 4 acres, a cattle gate with a rooster silhouette welded into it, and a kennel operation out back with a hand-routed sign that said, Quarles, Kennels, and Rescue, Second Chance Pause. She had 3 sons. Ewell was 39 and ran the kennels. He had a soft, doughy handshake and eyes that never landed on you. Stoney was 36, hauled scrap and ran a wrecker, and had the parish's animal control impound contract in his name. Cade was 28 and drank, and was the only one of them who had ever looked Colter in the face and held it. Twyla had grown up in that house, and had never once, in 9 years of marriage, criticized her mother in front of him. The letters came in bundles, because mail to a salvage vessel arrived when it arrived. Once every few months, folded inside Twyla's, would be a page in a child's careful hand, a drawing of a stick man in a diving helmet, a note that said, "We are good daddy, love Nettie." Colter kept every one of them in a gallon freezer bag, because everything in the chamber eventually got damp. On the 19th day, at what the clock claimed was 06:20, Chief Bostic's voice came into the chamber over the comm, and it was wrong before she said anything at all. Bostic's voice was normally flat as a runway. "Master Diver," she said, "come to the port viewport. I've got an email routed to the chamber tablet. It's from Adelphi Trowick. She says she's your daughter's teacher." Ivor LeChance sat up in his rack. Colter came to the viewport. Bostic held the tablet against the 6-inch acrylic on her side so he could read it through the glass, because paper doesn't go into a saturation chamber, and neither does anything else that wasn't sterilized and locked through the medical trunk. The message was short. Teachers write short when they are afraid. "Mr. Vessey, I am Nettie's 4th grade teacher at Cutgrass Elementary. I have tried the emergency contact number on file 11 times since March, and I am always told you are unavailable. I have filed twice with the parish, and nothing has happened. I am sending you this photograph because I do not know what else to do, and because I want you to know that I took it myself, on Tuesday, at 12:20 in the afternoon, in my own cafeteria." Colter said, "Chief scroll." Bostic scrolled. The photograph was taken from the doorway of a school cafeteria, at an angle, the way you take a picture you know you shouldn't be taking. In the middle distance, past the ordinary noise of 100 kids, there was a gray plastic trash barrel by the tray return. 2 children were standing at it. The girl had her sleeves pushed up and both arms in the barrel to the elbow. She was 9 years old, tall for it, with her hair pulled back in a rubber band that was not a hair tie. She had her chin turned toward the room, watching it while she worked, because she had learned to watch a room while she worked. The boy was 7. He was holding a milk carton in both hands like it was something he had won. His shoes were canvas, the kind a church donation bin gives out, and they were curled up at the toes because they were 2 sizes too small, and his feet had kept going anyway. They were his. There is a thing that happens to a man's hearing in a moment like that, where the world goes quiet in a very specific way, like water closing over the top of you. Colter Vessey stood in a steel can 480 feet of pressure deep, 600 miles from land, 5 days from being allowed to breathe surface air, and he looked at a photograph of his children eating out of a garbage can. And he did not shout. He put his right hand flat on the acrylic, and he read the last line of the teacher's message twice. "They tell everyone here their daddy left and doesn't send anything. Nettie told me that herself. She wasn't crying when she said it. That's what scared me. Ivor LeChance said, very quietly. Colter said, Chief Bostic, I need you to log the time I read this. To the minute. Bostic's pen was already moving. 0624. Thank you. His voice through the unscrambler came out steady, which surprised even him. Print that email. Print the photo at the highest resolution the ship's printer has. Put both in a sealed envelope, sign across the seal, and give it to no one but me. Then get me Commander Sturdivant. Master Diver. And Chief. He was still looking at the picture. Don't reply to that teacher yet. Not until I know who's reading her mail. Because that was the first thing that had gone through him after the roaring stopped. And it had gone through him cold and clean. And it had not felt like grief at all. It had felt like a checklist. 11 calls to an emergency contact number. 2 filings with the parish. Nothing happened. Somebody was answering that phone. Somebody was catching those filings. And for 3 years, somebody had been telling his children a story about a man who left. Ivor was on his feet now, one hand braced on the bunk frame, filling the little steel room with the kind of anger a man has on your behalf when he can't have it for himself. We get you up, he said. We start the schedule now. We get you on a helo at Brindisi. 5 days, Colter said. Colt. 5 days, Ivor. There's no version where it's 4. He turned away from the viewport and sat down on the edge of his rack, and put his hands on his knees, and looked at the taped-up photograph above it. Nettie at 6, Augie at 4, on a dock, squinting, and he made himself breathe the way you breathe at depth. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. Panic burns gas. Gas is time. Time is your life. He had 5 days in a can. He decided, right there, that they were not going to be 5 wasted days. They were going to be the first 5 days of the operation. Commander Marion Sturdivant came on the comm 11 minutes later, and she had already read the email, because Bostic had done exactly what Colter would have done in her place. Master Diver Vessey, she said, I'm sorry. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you for 4 things, and none of them are sympathy. Go. 1. Red Cross message, initiated now, so the paperwork's ahead of me instead of behind me. 2. Emergency leave, 30 days, effective the hour I'm at surface pressure. 3. I need the ship's legal officer to certify, in writing, the exact dates and times of every monitored phone call I have made from this chamber for the last 36 months, with the numbers dialed, out of Chief Bostic's log. There was a pause on the line. You think somebody's going to say you never called, Sturdivant said. Ma'am, somebody already has. For 3 years. I'd just like to bring the receipts. And the 4th? Colter looked at the acrylic port, at the smear where his hand had been. Ma'am, I need you to not let me off this ship 1 hour early. Not 1. If I come up hot, I'm a wheelchair, and a man in a wheelchair is no use to a 9-year-old. Whatever I say over the next 5 days, hold the schedule. Sturdivant was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Master Diver, in 14 years, I've never had a sailor ask me to stop him from doing something stupid before he did it. Ma'am, that's the whole job. The decompression schedule started at 09:10 that morning. 480 feet of pressure, coming off at a rate measured in feet per hour, for 120 hours. Colter Vessey had never had 120 hours with nothing to do with his hands. He had a pen, a legal pad locked through the medical trunk, a chamber tablet with a satellite connection that dropped every 20 minutes, and a voice that came out of the unscrambler like a duck. By the end of the first day, the legal pad had a page at the front with 3 words at the top, and the words were not a plan yet. They were a question. Who answers the phone? He started with the number itself. It was a 985 area code, and he had been dialing it for 3 years, and he had never once thought about it, because why would a man think about his own home number? He had it memorized in his hands the way you memorize a valve sequence. He asked Bostic to run it. Bostic came back 40 minutes later, and her voice had gone very careful. Master Diver, that number's a voice-over internet line. It's not a carrier phone. It's the kind of number you get free from a web service and forward wherever you want. Since when? I can't tell that from here, but your service record has a different number listed for Twyla Vessey as emergency contact. A cell, and it's got an update stamp on it from 4 months into your first deployment. Colter wrote both numbers on the pad, side by side. Chief, he said, Who is allowed to change my emergency contact information? You, or your spouse, with a power of attorney. He sat with that for a while. Then he wrote a third line under the two numbers. What else did the POA move? Because he remembered signing one. Every deployed sailor signs one. He had signed a general power of attorney in a folding chair in a hangar at Little Creek 11 days before his first sat billet, because you cannot run a household from 400 feet down. He had signed it to Twyla. He remembered something else too, and it arrived the way things arrive when a man finally stops defending a memory. Twyla had brought the notary. Twyla had said her mama knew a lady who did it cheap, and the lady had come to the house with a stamp in a shoebox, and Lurline had made iced tea. Colter wrote, the notary was hers. On the second day, at 80% of the way to nothing, he called Cassius Renard. Renard had been a Navy diver with him at Panama City 15 years back, had blown out a shoulder on a hull inspection, and had gone federal, first as an investigator, now as a special agent on a public corruption and crimes against children task force out of New Orleans. He answered on the second ring and said, Vessey, it is 4 a.m. Cass, I need you to listen to me the way you listen to a witness, not the way you listen to a friend. There was the sound of a man sitting up in bed. Go. Colter told it in order, flat, no adjectives, the way you give a dive report. The photograph, the teacher, the 11 calls, the 2 parish filings, the voice-over internet number, the power of attorney, the $2,700 a month for 36 months. When he was done, Renard was quiet for a long moment. Colt, he said, you understand what you just described. Say it out loud anyway. You described a household that has been receiving a Navy allotment for 3 years, while the children in it look like they're not getting fed. That's not a family problem. That's a money problem wearing a family's clothes. And people don't do that for 3 years unless it's working, which means it's not the only thing they're doing. Colter looked at the pressure gauge on the bulkhead. 390 feet. How fast can you move? He said. On what? A photograph a teacher took and a bad feeling? Colt, I'm not the sheriff of Belclair Parish. I can't kick a door in Louisiana because your gut hurts. I need a predicate. Give me a federal hook and I can put a bulldozer behind you. Give me a sad story and I can give you a hug over the phone. What kind of hook? Money crossing a line, wires, a charity taking donations, a government contract. Anything that isn't just one family being ugly to each other in private. Colter wrote second chance pause on the legal pad, and under it, he wrote the phrase that had been sitting in his head since he was 28 years old, and had first read that sign on the cattle gate, and had thought nothing of it at all. Rescue. Cass, he said. My mother-in-law runs a dog rescue, takes donations, and her middle son holds the parish animal control impound contract. There was a silence on the line that Colter would remember for the rest of his life, because it was the sound of a federal agent sitting all the way up. Say that again slowly, Renard said. On the third day, he called Delphi Trowick. He did not call the school. He called the cell number in the signature block of her email, at 9 p.m. her time, and when she answered, he said, Ma'am, my name is Colter Vessey, and I am 400 feet underwater. This call is being recorded by the United States Navy. I need you to tell me everything, and I need you to understand that I believe you. She cried for about 11 seconds. Then she was extremely good. She had noticed Nettie in October, because Nettie ate like a soldier. Fast, head down, everything, including the parts other kids threw away. She had noticed Augie in November, because Augie had stopped talking, and Augie was the loudest child in the 2nd grade. In January, she had called the emergency card number and gotten a sweet woman who said Nettie's daddy had gone back to his real family in Virginia, and it was just such a shame, and could the school please stop bringing him up because it upset the child. In February, she had filed with the parish. In March, she had filed again. In April, a deputy came by the school, spoke to the principal for 6 minutes, and left. In May, the principal called Delphi into his office and told her that Belclair Parish was a small place and the Quarleses had been in it a long time. Mr. Vessey, she said, there's one more thing and I've been sick about whether to put it in the email. Say it. 2 weeks ago, Nettie came to school with a mark around her right wrist, not a bruise, an abrasion, all the way around, like a band. I asked her about it, and she said she got it climbing. And then she said, Delphi Trewick stopped. She said, "Don't call anybody. It's worse after somebody calls." Colter closed his eyes. 310 feet. "Miss Trewick," he said, "do you know a woman named Ottilie Frawley?" "Everybody knows Miss Ottie. She carried the rural route out on Sawline for 30 years. Is she still on that road? Right across from the Quarles place." He called Ottilie Frawley at 7 the next morning, day 4, and a woman with a voice like a screen door said, "Who is this, and why are you calling a widow at 7? "Ma'am, my name is Colter Vessey. I'm Nettie and Augie's father." The silence on that line lasted 8 full seconds. "Well," said Ottilie Frawley, "it's about damn time somebody answered." She told him she'd been calling the parish since March. She told him she had a spiral notebook, the kind you get at a dollar store, and she had 11 pages of dates in it because she had carried mail for 30 years, and a mail carrier writes things down. Then she told him about the kennel. "There's a run out back, past the whelping shed. Chain link, 6 by 10, concrete floor, tin roof. They keep the ones that bite in it." She said it the way old country women say terrible things, plainly, with the terrible part left in. 9 days ago, that would be the 2nd, I was coming back from the Winn-Dixie about 4 in the afternoon, and Ewell had your girl in it. Colter did not move. "There was a dog in there with her," Ottilie said. "A big male, brindle, chewed up ears. She had her back to the fence, and she was standing perfectly still with her chin up. She wasn't hollering. That's what got me. 9 years old and she knew not to holler. How long? I sat in my truck in my own driveway with my phone in my hand for 22 minutes, Mr. Vessey, and I called the sheriff's office at 4:11, and they said they'd send somebody, and at 4:33, Ewell walked out and let her out, and she went in the house, and I never saw a deputy at all." Her voice cracked, once, and then she got it back. "I have carried mail to that family since Lurline's husband was alive. I want you to understand what I'm telling you. It's not the sheriff won't come, it's that they're scared of them. Stoney's got the impound. Urban Mabry's had that badge 4 elections. They tow for the parish, they kennel for the parish, they got 200 people who owe them a favor, and about 40 who owe them money." "Miss Ottilie," Colter said, "why are you telling me?" The old woman was quiet for a moment. "Because in '99 I had a grandson who spent a summer out there," she said. "And I called then, too." 220 feet. Colter Vessey wrote one line on the legal pad and then sat looking at it for a long time. "She's 9 and she knew not to holler." Under it he wrote, 5 days, 19 days, 6 minutes. Because that was the shape of it now, and Colter had spent his adult life turning terrible situations into procedures, and a procedure has a shape. 5 days to come up, and he could not shorten them. 19 days of leave after that, once he'd burned the travel. 19 days to build something a federal agent could stand on, in a parish where the sheriff was theirs, and the paperwork was theirs, and the phone was theirs, and at the end of it, 6 minutes. Because that was all they had ever given him, and he had decided somewhere around 300 feet that he was going to give it back to them exactly. He spent day 4 and day 5 on the tablet, 20 minutes at a time between satellite dropouts, doing the least dramatic and most dangerous thing a man in his position can do. Paperwork. He pulled 36 months of leave and earnings statements from the Navy's pay portal. Every one showed the allotment, $2,700, on the 1st, to an account ending in 4419. He requested the routing on 4419 and found it was a joint account at Belclair Community Bank in the names of Twyla Vessey and Lurline Quarles. He had never in his life been on that account. He had assumed, and he made himself write the word assumed on the pad and circle it, because Bert Vessey's rule was about checks, and he had not done this one. He had assumed the allotment went to his wife. He pulled the account's overdraft history and learned there had never been one. Not once in 3 years. That account had never dipped below $11,000. He wrote, the money was always there. Then he hired a lawyer, from a decompression chamber, using a satellite link that failed every 20 minutes. Imogene Duquette had an office over a tire shop in Houma, and a voice that suggested she had never lost an argument to a man. She heard him out and said, Mr. Vessey, I'm going to be blunt with you, because you're paying by the minute in a way that no client of mine ever has. Emergency custody is not hard when you have a doctor. It is nearly impossible when you have a feeling. Right now you have a photograph and an old woman's notebook. Get me a doctor. What kind? Two kinds. A dentist and a child abuse pediatrician. In that order. Nobody argues with teeth. At 0640 on the 5th day, the chamber reached surface pressure. Chief Rhoda Bostic broke the seal on the trunk, and the door swung, and the air that came in smelled like diesel and salt and rain and the actual world. Colter Vessey stepped out of a steel can he had lived in for 24 days. His legs shook. His ears were full of cotton. He had lost 11 pounds, and his hands were pruned white and soft as a baby's from the constant damp. Ivor LaChance put a hand on the back of his neck and said, "Go get your kids." Bostic handed him the sealed envelope with her signature across the flap, and a second one, thicker, that he hadn't asked for. "What's this, Chief?" 36 months of my green notebook, Rhoda Bostic said, photocopied and certified by the legal officer. Every call you made from that chamber, Master Diver. Every date, every time, every number, every duration. Her jaw was tight. 216 minutes, sir. You never missed one. Colter Vessey looked at the envelope in his hand, and something moved behind his face for the first time in 5 days. "Chief Bostic," he said, "when this is over, I'm going to buy you something ridiculous." "Buy your boy shoes," she said. He flew Brindisi to Rome, Rome to Atlanta, Atlanta to New Orleans, and he did not sleep on any of the 3 legs. Cassius Renard was standing at the bottom of the escalator, in a gray suit with a folder under his arm. "You look like hell," Renard said. "I've been in a can." "I know. I've been in a database." Renard walked him out into the wet Louisiana heat. Belclair Parish pays Quarles Kennels and Rescue a per-animal per-day boarding rate on its animal control impound contract. $18 a head a day. Renewed without bid 4 times. Signed on the parish side by a purchasing agent who is Stony Quarles' second cousin. Renard opened the folder against the roof of his car. Last fiscal year, the parish paid them for 491,000 dog days. Colter did the arithmetic. That's 1,345 dogs. Every day, all year. In a parish of 19,000 people. Colt, they've got 110 runs out there. I counted them on satellite. So they're billing for dogs that don't exist. That's a theory. What I've got is a discrepancy, and a discrepancy isn't a case. Renard closed the folder. And there's a second entity. Second Chance Paws is a registered 501/3. It's got a donation page. It took in $240,000 in donations last year, mostly from out of state, mostly from people who saw dog videos on the internet. It has one officer, your mother-in-law. Where does the money go? Into a management company called Sawline Holdings LLC as a facility fee. Sawline owns the 4 acres, the house, 2 wreckers, a bass boat, and as of 14 months ago, an in-ground fiberglass swimming pool with a heater and a waterfall feature, installed by a contractor out of Thibodaux for $41,000. Renard looked at him. You want to know whose name is on the Sawline operating agreement as a member? Say it. Twyla Vessey, signed by power of attorney. He paused. By her mother. Colter Vessey stood in an airport parking garage in Louisiana, and for the second time in 5 days, the world went quiet in that specific way. He said, Cass, when did she sign it? 22 months ago. I was at 480 feet 22 months ago. I know, Renard said. That's the good news. That's your federal hook. Because if a power of attorney executed for a deployed service member was used to put his family's Navy allotment into an LLC that's laundering charity donations and padding a government contract, then you're not a sad dad anymore, Colt. You're a victim in a wire fraud, and I own wire fraud. He drove to Cutgrass at 6 the next morning, and he did not go to the house. He went to the school. He parked across the street from Cutgrass Elementary at 6:52 a.m. in a rented gray sedan, and he sat with his hands on the wheel and watched a white Ford dually with Quarles painted on the door drop 2 children at the curb 40 minutes before the building opened. The truck pulled off before they reached the doors. Nettie got out first and then reached back in and lifted Augie down because Augie was small for 7 and the truck was high. Colter watched his daughter take her brother's hand and walk him to a concrete bench by the flagpole and sit him down, and take his backpack off him and set it on his lap so he'd have something to hold, and then stand next to him with her arms folded, facing the parking lot, watching it. 9 years old, standing guard. He got out of the car. He was halfway across the street when Augie saw him, and the boy did the thing that broke him. He didn't run to him. He looked at his sister first. He looked at Nettie for permission. And Nettie's whole body went rigid, and she stepped in front of her brother and put one arm back across him, and Colter Vessey watched his own daughter get ready to fight him. He stopped 10 feet away and went down on one knee on the wet asphalt, which put his eyes below hers, and he put both hands out flat with the palms up, and he did not say her name. He said, "It's 480 feet. Nettie's face did not change, but her chin came up, a half-inch. "That's how deep I was," he said. "You asked me once how deep, and I said I'd tell you when you were 9. You're 9 now. 480 feet. It takes 5 days to come up. Not 5 hours. 5 days. And I couldn't come up faster, and I would have. And I know that isn't the same thing." Something went across her face then. Fast, like weather. She said, "You didn't call." 216 minutes, Colter said. "I called every single month for 3 years. 6 minutes each time, because that's all they give you. Somebody answered every one of them and told me you were at practice." "I don't have practice," Nettie said. "I know that now." Augie made a small sound behind his sister's arm. Nettie said in a voice that was much too flat for a 9-year-old, "Grandma said you sent nothing. She showed us the bank thing." Colter reached into his jacket, very slowly, the way you move around a spooked animal, and took out a folded sheaf of paper and held it out. "That's every dollar," he said. $2,700 every month for 36 months. $97,200. It's got my name on it, and the date, and where it went. You're the smartest kid I have ever met in my life, and I'm not going to ask you to believe me. I'm asking you to read it." His daughter did not take the paper. His son did. Augie Vessey came out from behind his sister with his mouth open and took the pages in both hands, and looked at the numbers, and looked at his father, and said, "You sent money for shoes?" And Colter Vessey, master diver, 41 years old, put both hands over his face in the parking lot of Cutgrass Elementary and made a sound he had never made in his life. It was Nettie who put her hand on the top of his head, very lightly, the way you'd touch something to see if it was real. He drove them to Homa that morning instead of to school, with Delphi Trowick's blessing and a note in her handwriting in his pocket, and he took them to a pediatric dentist named Dr. Berdine Corso, who had agreed to a 7:30 appointment because Imogene Duquette had called her at home. Dr. Corso took a full set of x-rays on Augie and then went out into the hallway and stood with her back to the wall for a minute before she came back in. 14, she said. 14 active carious lesions. 4 of them are into the pulp, which means he's been in real pain for months, and 2 are abscessed, which means there's active infection sitting 8 inches from his brain. She was working to keep her voice professional. "Mr. Vessey, this doesn't happen in 6 months. This is years, and there's no evidence of any preventive care ever. No sealants, no fluoride, no cleanings." Colter said, "Can you put that in writing today?" "I'm going to put it in writing today, and I'm going to call it in to the state today, and I want you to know that if anyone tells you a 7-year-old just has soft teeth, that person is lying to you." Nettie went in next, and Dr. Corso came out grim in a different way. "She's got 4, but hers are all on the same side, and they're older. She's been chewing on one side for a long time. That happens when the other side hurts and nobody helps you, and eventually the pain goes away because the nerve dies." Then Dr. Wilhelmina Tandy, a child abuse pediatrician at Belclaire Regional, spent 2 hours with them, separately, in a room with a one-way glass, and a nurse who had done this 1,000 times. She documented on Augie, height at the 4th percentile against a growth chart that had him at the 40th at age 4, a healed fracture in the left ulna that no one had ever set, and a pattern of shoe deformity consistent with wearing footwear at least 2 sizes small for a period of over a year. She documented on Nettie, a circumferential abrasion around the right wrist, 17 days old, consistent with a ligature or a restraint, 3 healed scars on the left forearm consistent with dog bites, none of which appeared in any medical record anywhere in the state, and a body mass index at the 2nd percentile. And then she sat down across from Colter and said, "Mr. Vessey, I need to tell you what your daughter told me, and I need you to stay in that chair while I do it." He stayed in the chair. "She said the kennel is for when you break a rule twice. She said the first time is the shed. She told me the rules. Dr. Tandy looked at her notes and did not look up. You don't say your daddy's name in the house. You don't answer the phone. You don't tell the school anything. And you don't let a dog out of a run. Ever. No matter what's happening in it. Colter said, very quietly. She let a dog out. She let a dog out, Dr. Tandy said. A brindle male, on the 2nd of this month. She said he was going to be sold on Saturday to some men who come with a stock trailer, and she said, and I am quoting a 9-year-old, the ones they sell on Saturday don't come back, and they're not adopted, because adopted dogs go out the front, and Saturday dogs go out the back at 4 in the morning, and we have to load them. The room was very quiet. Doctor, Colter said, say that last part again. We have to load them. He got the emergency custody order at 4:15 that afternoon, because Imogene Duquette had been right. Nobody argues with teeth. He did not tell the Quarleses. He drove to the house on Old Sawline Road at 7 that evening, with the children safe in a motel in Homa, under the eye of Ottilie Frawley and a deputy Renard trusted, and he pulled through the cattle gate with the rooster on it, and he parked next to a bass boat, and he walked up onto that wraparound porch and knocked on the door of a house his money had paid for. And when Lurline Quarles opened it, Colter Vessey let his shoulders drop and let his voice go thin and let his hands shake, and he became the smallest, saddest, most beaten-down man in Belclare Parish. Because Bert Vessey's rule had a second half that Colter had never said out loud to anybody, and it went like this. The water doesn't care how angry you are, so don't spend the anger. Bank it. Carry it down with you. You'll need it at the bottom. Well, said Lurline Quarles, with her hand on her heart and her face like a church supper. Look what the Lord dragged home. She hugged him. She smelled like vanilla and cigarette smoke. Over her shoulder, through the open door, Colter could see out the back of the house, past the kitchen, through the sliding glass, to a lit blue rectangle in the dark, with a waterfall feature running down one end of it. $41,000. I lost it out there, Miss Lurline, he heard himself say, and his voice cracked in exactly the right place. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be a daddy anymore. And Lurline Quarles patted his back and said, Oh, honey, you just let me handle everything. The next 19 days were the best work Colter Vessey ever did, and almost none of it looked like anything at all. He moved into the back bedroom, the one with the water stain. He said thank you a lot. He let Lurline hold his phone so you don't have to worry about it, and did not tell her about the second one taped inside the spare tire well of the rented sedan. He let Ewell clap him on the shoulder and call him sailor in a tone that had a little grin in it. He let Stoney complain about the parish. He drank a beer on the porch with Cade, the youngest, and said almost nothing, and noticed that Cade drank like a man trying to get away from something in his own head. He told them the children were in Homa with a doctor, some kind of state thing, you know how they are, and he watched Lurline's face when he said it, and he saw the exact half-second where she calculated whether to panic, and decided not to. That half-second told him she thought she had the parish covered. He asked Twyla to walk with him down to the ditch on the second night. His wife was 34 and looked 50. Her hands shook when she lit a cigarette. She would not look at him. How long, he said. Colter, I'm not yelling. I'm never going to yell at you. How long? And Twyla Vessey sat down on an overturned bucket by a Louisiana drainage ditch and told him. Her mother had taken the allotment from the first month. Twyla had asked once, and Lurline had explained, patiently, that the money went into the household, and the household took care of everybody, and then reminded her that she had no job, no car in her own name, no bank account her mother wasn't on, and 2 children who lived under her mother's roof. Lurline had been very generous with the pills that made the bad years bearable, and Twyla had understood by about the 3rd year that this was the point. She said you'd leave anyway, Twyla said. She said all of them leave, and it's better if the kids get used to it early. And the phone? Mama set it up. She said it'd be easier. 1 number. Twyla was crying now, silently, the way people cry when they've had a lot of practice. Colter, I want you to know something, and I'm not saying it to be forgiven. There's a folder on that phone. Every time you called and she told you they were out, she recorded it. All of it. She said it was for court, if you ever tried to take them. Colter went very still. Recorded what, exactly? All of it, Twyla said, including the ones where Nettie was standing right there. He sat down on the wet grass next to the bucket, and he looked at the sky over Belclare Parish for a while. "Twyla," he said, "I'm going to ask you to do one thing, and after that I will never ask you for anything again as long as I live, and I'll tell the judge you did it." "What?" "Ooh, don't warn her." His wife wiped her face with the back of her wrist and said, "Okay." The kennel was the part he had to see with his own eyes, and Quarles was delighted to show him, because Ewell was the kind of man who mistakes a quiet audience for an admiring one. 110 runs under a long tin roof. The noise was physical. The smell got into the back of Colter's throat and stayed there for a week. "We run a real operation," Ewell said, walking him down the aisle with a clipboard he never looked at. "Parish brings us everything. Strays, bite cases, hoarder houses, 18 a day ahead. How many you got right now?" "Oh, we stay full," Colter counted as they walked. He had been trained to count things in bad visibility for 20 years. 61 occupied runs, 49 empty. At the end of the aisle, past the whelping shed, there was a 6x10 chain-link run with a concrete floor and a tin roof and nothing in it. "What's that one for?" Colter asked. Quarles said, "Problems." And then he laughed and looked at Colter to see if Colter would laugh too. And Colter, who had banked every ounce of it, who had carried it all the way down, smiled at his brother-in-law and said, "Man's got to have some place to put problems." That night he went back with a flashlight, a phone, and a woman named Dr. Lucinda Ozanne, a veterinarian out of Thibodeau who had lost a contract fight with the Quarleses 6 years earlier and had been waiting a long time to be asked. She brought a universal microchip scanner. They did 41 dogs in 90 minutes, working the aisle from the far end with the lights off, and Colter held the flashlight in his teeth and wrote while she read. 19 of the 41 had chips. Of those 19, 11 were registered to owners in 3 parishes who had reported them missing. 2 were registered to a rescue in Mississippi that had transferred them to Second Chance Paws 11 months earlier, along with a $4,000 transport grant. And 1, a shepherd mix with a ruined ear, run 88, came back registered to the Belclare Parish Sheriff's Office as a retired K9, reported deceased in 2023. Dr. Ozanne stood up in the dark and said, "Mr. Vessey, they're billing the parish $18 a day for a dog the sheriff signed a death certificate on. Can you swear to that?" "I can swear to it, notarize it, and read it out loud at the Rotary Club." Then she scanned the empty runs, because she was thorough, and found what Colter had already guessed. The run numbers on the parish invoices went to 214. There were 110. They had been billing for a kennel twice the size of the one that existed. On day 9, Goldie Quarles found him. She was 16, Ewell's daughter, and she had the family jaw, and none of the family confidence. And she came out to the ditch where he was pretending to fish, and stood there for a while before she said anything. Then she said, "You're not really broken, are you?" Colter looked at her. "I've been watching you for 9 days, Goldie said. "You say thank you too much. Nobody says thank you that much, unless they're counting something." He set the rod down. "What do you want, Goldie?" The girl's chin went up, and Colter recognized the gesture, because he had seen his own daughter do it in a parking lot, and it made something turn over in his chest. "I want out," she said, "and I've got 406 videos on a cloud account my daddy doesn't know exists, going back 2 years. Saturday loads, the stock trailer, the men, Nettie in the run, and the thing in December." "What thing in December?" Goldie Quarles's voice did not shake, which was somehow worse. "When Grandma made Augie stand in the yard in the rain for 2 hours, because he asked her when you were coming home." Colter Vessey looked out at a brown ditch in Belclare Parish for a long moment. Then he said, "Goldie, I need you to hear this exactly. I am not going to ask you to do one more dangerous thing. You have done enough. What I'm going to do is drive you to Homa tonight to a lawyer named Imogene Duquette, and you're going to tell her everything, and from that minute you don't come back here. Not for clothes, not for anything." The girl started to cry, finally, the way 16-year-olds do, all at once and furious about it. "They're gonna say I'm a liar," she said. "Goldie," Colter said, "you've got 406 videos. Let them." By day 14, the shape of it was complete, and it was uglier than anyone had guessed, and it was federal in 4 different directions. Vernell Hargett, An investigator with the Louisiana Attorney General's charitable fraud section put the civil side together. Second Chance Paws had taken in $680,000 in donations over 4 years and dispersed less than 9% of it to anything resembling animal care. The rest had gone to Sawline Holdings LLC as facility fees, a company whose assets were a house, a bass boat, 2 wreckers, and a heated in-ground pool. Renard's task force put the criminal side together. The parish impound billing at $18 a head on a kennel of 110 runs, invoiced at up to $214 for 4 straight fiscal years, submitted by email across state lines through the parish's cloud accounting vendor. Wire fraud, 1,104 counts of it, 1 per invoice. And underneath all of it, Colter's own thread, the one he'd started on a legal pad at 400 feet, the general power of attorney, executed by a deployed service member at Little Creek, notarized by a woman named Melba Souls who, when Renard's people finally sat down across from her in her kitchen in Raceland, took about 90 seconds to admit that she had never watched anybody sign anything, that Lurline Quarles brought her documents in batches, and that she'd been stamping them for 11 years for $40 a batch. Sowles gave them one more thing, unprompted, because guilty people who finally start talking cannot stop. "There's a red accordion folder," she said, "in the bottom of the gun safe in the office off the carport. She keeps the good stuff in it. She showed me once. She was proud of it." Renard called Colter that night. "We can go in 8 days," he said. "Warrants for the house, the kennel, the office, Stoney's yard, and the bank. AG's got the charity. The state's got the kids' case. Deputy Naquin's flipped, and she'll wear a wire on Mabry. I've got 140 pages, and every one of them is nailed down." He paused. "Colt, listen to me. When we do this, it's a raid. It's loud. 6 cars, 11 agents, dogs, a dog crimes unit from LSU, the whole thing." "No," Colter said. "What do you mean, no?" Colter Vessey was sitting in a rented sedan on a shell road 2 miles from Old Sawline, watching the last of the light go out of the sky over the sugarcane. "Cass," he said, "if you come up that driveway with 6 cars, they'll have 4 minutes. 4 minutes is enough for Ewell to walk out to the burn barrel. 4 minutes is enough for Lurline to get to that gun safe. You'll get the invoices, because the invoices are on a server in Baton Rouge. You'll get the money, because the money's in a bank. And you will never, ever get the phone." There was a long silence. "You want them all in one room," Renard said slowly, "away from the safe." "I want them all outside," Colter said, "in the dark, in their bathing suits, holding drinks, 200 feet from the house, with their phones in their hands, and nowhere on God's earth to put them." "Colt," Renard's voice had changed. "What did you do?" "I made a donation," said Colter Vessey. He had made it on day 11, at the kitchen table, in front of Lurline, with a cashier's check for $20,000, drawn on the account of a man who had just been paid 36 months of sea pay and hazardous duty pay, and had not spent any of it. He had slid it across the table and let his voice do the shaky thing and said, "Miss Lurline, I've been thinking about it, and the only good thing in this whole family is what you do out there with those dogs. I want to help. I want people to know." And he had watched her look at the check, and watched a lifetime of appetite come up behind her eyes like a fish rising. "I was thinking a party," he'd said, "at the pool. Get the parish out here. Get the sheriff. Get the paper. Call it the Founder's Swim." He had shrugged, exactly like a broken man reaching for something. "Miss Lurline, I've been at the bottom of the ocean for 3 years. I'd just like to stand next to something good for one night." Lurline Quarles had taken his face in both hands and told him he was a better man than her daughter deserved. She had invited 110 people. She had invited Sheriff Urban Mabry. She had invited the parish president and 2 members of the Animal Control Board, and the purchasing agent, who was Stoney's second cousin. She had invited a photographer from the Belle Claire Weekly. She had a banner made, Second Chance Paws Founders Swim, and she had it hung across the carport where the office was, and she bought 11 cases of beer and $120 worth of shrimp. She had the pool heated to 86 degrees. And on the afternoon of the party, Colter Vessey drove to Houma and picked up his son and his daughter and took them to a house on the north side with a fenced yard that belonged to Delphi Trewick's sister, and got down on one knee in the driveway and told them exactly what was going to happen that night. In order, with nothing left out, because they had been lied to enough. "You're not going to be there," he said. "That's on purpose. There's nothing there you need to see." Nettie said, "Will Grandma go to jail?" "I think so." His daughter thought about that with the seriousness of a small judge. "Will the dogs be okay?" And Colter Vessey had to stop for a second before he could answer his 9-year-old. "Yeah, baby," he said. "The dogs are the first thing they're doing." The party started at 6. By 8 o'clock there were about 90 people in Lurline Quarles' backyard, and the pool lights were on, and the waterfall feature was running, and somebody's Bluetooth speaker was playing Zydeco, and Sheriff Urban Mabry was standing at the shallow end with a beer, laughing, in a Hawaiian shirt. Lurline gave a speech from the diving board end at 8:20. She talked about second chances. She talked about how the good Lord puts broken things in your path so you can mend them. She got a little teary, and the photographer from the Weekly got a picture of it. Colter Vessey stood at the back of the crowd with a plastic cup of beer he had not touched, and when she said his name and made everybody clap for the sailor who'd come home and given so generously, he raised the cup and smiled and let 90 people look at him. At 8:31, he set the cup down on the concrete and walked to the corner of the yard by the pool equipment shed and took out a phone that Lurline Quarles did not know he had and sent one word: now. There were no sirens. That was the thing that Belclair Parish talked about for years afterward, that there were no sirens at all. Just headlights, coming down Old Saw Line in a line, and then more headlights coming across the cane field on the service road behind the kennel, which was the direction nobody ever came from, and then the sound of a helicopter that had been sitting in a field 4 miles away with its engine off. The federal agents came around both sides of the house at the same time, at a walk, and the first thing that happened was that 11 of them peeled off toward the kennel with a veterinarian and a state dog crimes unit, because Colter had made that a condition and Renard had agreed. 90 people in a backyard turned around at once. Cassius Renard walked into the middle of a pool party in a windbreaker with 3 letters on it and said, in a completely conversational voice, "Nobody's swimming. Everybody's hands out of their pockets." And then Colter Vessey watched the thing he had spent 19 days engineering. He watched Ewell Quarles look at the house, 200 feet away, past 90 people, past a line of agents. He watched Stony Quarles look at the driveway, where his truck was blocked in by 4 cars. He watched Lurline Quarles, 63 years old, in a good blouse, standing on the pool deck she had built with her son-in-law's money. And he watched her do the arithmetic that every guilty person in that yard was doing at the same second, which was, "I cannot get to the safe. I cannot get to the burn barrel, and I am holding the only thing that can put me in a cell for the rest of my life. There is exactly one place, at a pool party, to put something you need destroyed." Lurline Quarles turned and threw her phone into the deep end. And then it happened all around the pool, in about 4 seconds. Like popcorn, Ewell threw his, Stoney threw his, the purchasing agent threw his, 2 men Colter had never seen before threw theirs, and Sheriff Urban Mabry, standing in the shallow end in a Hawaiian shirt with a beer in his hand, tossed his underhand into the middle of the deep end like a man skipping a stone. 11 phones went into 86-degree water. Cassius Renard's face did something complicated, and Colter Vessey took off his boots. He set them side by side on the concrete, the way he had set his boots down 10,000 times on a dive stage, and he took off his shirt, and 90 people watched a 41-year-old man with a chest like a barrel door walk to the edge of the deep end of a swimming pool that his own money had paid for. He looked at Lurline Quarles. He said, "Ma'am, I've been a diver for 20 years. And then he said the thing he had been carrying, banked, since 0624 on a Tuesday morning at 480 feet of pressure in the Ionian Sea. You threw it in the water. You gave the evidence to a diver." He went in clean, without a splash, and he was down for 11 seconds, and he came up with 3 phones in his hands and put them on the concrete at Renard's feet. He went down again, and again. Agents were pulling evidence bags out of a duffel and holding them open. Dr. Ozanne, who had come with the kennel team and had walked around the house to see, stood at the fence with her hand over her mouth. It took him 4 minutes and 40 seconds to bring up all 11. Because here is the thing that Lurline Quarles, 63 years old, with a mind like a set of books, did not know. Because it is the kind of thing you only know if you work in water for a living. Water doesn't erase a phone. Water shorts a phone. The screen dies, and the battery dies, and the thing goes black in your hand, and it feels like death. And every guilty person in America believes it is. But the storage chip is soldered to the board, and it is not a magnetic thing. And a federal forensics lab in Baton Rouge with a heated ultrasonic bath and a man who knows what he's doing will pull that chip and put it in a reader and get every single byte off it. 11 phones, 4 minutes and 40 seconds. And on Lurline Quarles' phone, in a folder she had labeled court, there were 3 years of recordings. 216 minutes of a man's voice, unscrambled by a computer aboard a Navy dive support vessel, saying hello, hello, is anybody there? It's Daddy. I've only got 6 minutes. And in 34 of them, 34, you can hear a little girl in the background of that kitchen, asking who's on the phone, being told it's nobody, baby. The federal indictment ran to 161 counts. Lurline Quarles was convicted at trial because she would not take a plea, because she genuinely believed a jury in Belclair Parish would look at a grandmother in a good blouse and see a grandmother in a good blouse. The jury was out for 2 hours and 11 minutes. They convicted her of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, theft of government funds, charitable fraud, and, on the state side, tried after, 2 counts of cruelty to juveniles and 1 count of false imprisonment of a child under 13. The judge at sentencing said that in 19 years on the bench, he had never seen a defendant put so much administrative discipline into so much cruelty, and that what disturbed him most was not the kennel and not the money, but a folder on a telephone labeled court. He gave her 22 years. Ewell Quarles got 19, and the dogfighting supply counts carried most of it. Stoney got 14. Sheriff Urban Mabry resigned on a Thursday and was convicted the following spring of honest services fraud, and served 9. Melba Sowells, the notary, lost her commission and got probation. Cade Quarles, the youngest, the one who drank, walked into the FBI's New Orleans field office 2 days after the raid, on his own, and gave them 11 hours of the family's history, including where the burn barrel was and what had been in it. The judge gave him time served and a treatment program, and he stood up in court and apologized to a 9-year-old girl by name. Colter Vessey pled guilty to 2 counts of criminal neglect. Colter Vessey stood up at her sentencing, which nobody asked him to do, and told the court that his wife had been 31 years old and had no bank account, no car, and no name of her own, and that a person can be a victim and still be responsible, and that both of those were true, and he asked for treatment instead of a cell. She got 5 years probation, mandatory inpatient treatment, and supervised visitation. She has not missed a session in 2 years. Nettie writes to her, Augie is not ready, and nobody makes him. The forfeiture took 11 months. Sawline Holdings 4 acres, the house, the wreckers, the bass boat, and the heated in-ground pool with the waterfall feature were all seized and sold, and the proceeds went into restitution and into a receivership that turned the kennel into an actual rescue. Ottilie Frawley, who is now 73, runs it. Dr. Lucinda Ozanne is the veterinarian of record. Goldie Quarles works there on weekends and is in her 2nd year of pre-vet at LSU on a scholarship that the receivership funds, and she is the only person in that county allowed to name the dogs. They did not fill in the pool. Colter asked them not to. It's a rehab pool now, heated to 86 degrees, with a ramp built down into the shallow end, and on any given Saturday, there is a big dog in it with a bad hip, swimming in circles with a volunteer holding a towel. The brindle male with the chewed-up ears, the one Nettie let out on the 2nd of the month, the one that started all of it, was found 9 days after the raid at a property in Assumption Parish, alive, and he is 14 now, and he sleeps in a Vessey house in Homa, on a bed by the back door. His name is 6. Nettie named him. Colter took a shore-duty billet teaching at the Naval Diving and Salvage Training Center, which is what a master diver does when he decides his children matter more than the deep, and he is home every night at 6. Augie had 4 extractions, 2 root canals and 11 fillings over 14 months, and got braces last spring. And at his last visit, Dr. Burdine Corso wrote cavity-free on a paper certificate, and the boy taped it to the refrigerator where it still is. He is in the 40th percentile for height again. He has 4 pairs of shoes, and he checks them every single week to make sure they still fit, and his father has decided not to correct that yet. Nettie took longer. She slept on the floor beside her brother's bed for 5 months. She kept food in her pillowcase for 7. She still eats fast. But there was a night about a year in when Colter got up at 2 in the morning for water and found her bedroom door standing open, which it had never been, and her asleep in the middle of the bed with both arms flung out, taking up all of it, the way a child sleeps when she is not guarding anything. He stood in that hallway for a long time. That summer he took them both to a lake and taught them to float, which is the first thing they teach you and the hardest thing to actually do, because floating requires you to stop fighting the water. Augie got it in 10 minutes because Augie has never fought anything in his life. Nettie fought it for 2 days. And on the 3rd afternoon, Colter stood chest deep with one hand flat under his daughter's back and told her the only thing his own father had ever told him, which is that the water doesn't care how angry you are, it only cares whether you did the checks, and that the checks were done, all of them, every single one, by him, on purpose, and that she could put her weight down now. And Nettie Vessey lay back in her father's hand, and after a while he took his hand away, and she didn't sink. So that's the story, and I want to be honest with you about the part that keeps rattling around in my head, because it isn't the pool, and it isn't the raid. It's a folder on a telephone labeled court. Think about that for a second. She recorded 3 years of a father calling home, not by accident, not out of sentiment, on purpose, as a weapon, because she assumed that one day somebody would ask, and she wanted to be able to prove that he'd been shut out. She was so certain her version of reality would hold that she archived the evidence against herself and called it insurance. That's what cruelty looks like when it's organized. It keeps records. And here's the thing that saved those 2 kids. So did he. A teacher wrote down a date. A mail carrier kept a spiral notebook. A life support chief kept a green log for 36 months and never once thought it mattered. A 16-year-old kept 406 videos on a cloud account. None of those people were heroes on the day they started writing. They were just people who refused to let something go unrecorded. If there's a takeaway here, I think it's this. The loud response feels good, and it almost always gives the other side an exit. The quiet one documents, waits, and takes everything. Colter Vessey couldn't come up fast. It would have killed him. So he came up slow, and by the time he surfaced, he was unstoppable. And the last thing I'll leave you with is the smallest thing in the whole story. A 9-year-old who knew not to holler, learning, 2 years later, that it was safe to sleep with the door open. That's the win. Everything else is just paperwork. Take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one.